From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris coming to you on a Wednesday. As always, a good program on tap, and I'm going to invite you to join in the conversation, because where else can you just call straight up and not get the receptionist or an answering machine or the runaround sometimes, unless you have his personal cell phone? You're not talking to the Davidson County Sheriff straight up. For a variety of reasons, chief among them, he's a busy guy, and yet he takes one day out of his morning every month to come join us on the flagship Morning Line here on the Plus. And I couldn't be happier about that. Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall. I mean, you do this. You take time to spend, and let's just be clear on this. I do not have to bribe you to do it.
Well, that's true. That's hazardous duty coming talking to you, but it's.
We've been doing it for a while.
Wow.
I mean, we go back a ways, and for a while you had done some with us on Zoom, but you, along with Jim Schulman, the vice mayor, is someone who comes in, and we do this. We don't have much of a full studio, obviously, but we social separate, and I far prefer having you in here with me. I think that's great having you with. Which camera are we on here? Oh, look at that one. It's pretty neat. She's got it all lined up here. Mary Lena does a great job. So, just thought I'd touch bases with you. There's a lot to talk about. We'll open up the phone lines if anyone wants to join in the conversation, 737-7587. But, when the story broke, and some of you may have been paying attention, the controversy over Core Civic and all of this, and then Core Civic seemed like it had its feelings hurt, and all of a sudden sent this letter and said, fine, you don't want us, we're out. And maybe the idea of them leaving for a lot of people is a good one. But it's happening quick. What is it, October 4th? You really have to scramble. What kind of pickle is this for you?
Yeah, I'm not happy at all about all that, Nick. We, I worked really hard with some council members and some advocates here in town about 2 or 3 years ago that were really interested in getting rid of the private correction system, and that was here. Keep in mind, none of the jails were private. They've never been, but there's a facility that houses convicted felons here in the county. Basically, it's a prison, and that prison was privately managed for 25 years.
Why did they do that? Why did they add that? Just so people have historic perspective. I mean, you house felons too, right?
Right. Well, we house pretrial felons waiting trial, but once you're convicted, you historically would have been sent to the prison that we've all known for years.
State system, right?
State system. But this was a private facility built in 1990 because the jails were overcrowded here in Davidson, and so the state and the county agreed to build a facility that would house the overcrowded portion that were state inmates, and so that's what this became, was a locally sentenced felon facility, and it's 1,400 beds, but it housed in the neighborhood today about 450 to 500 people. But really what happened was advocacy in this community about privatization became very loud, and wanted to get rid of the private prisons. And so what they didn't understand was that was not taxpayer money, it wasn't metro money, it was state money, it was state tax money, but not local. And so they would focus at the sheriff and focus at metro, which was really the wrong place to do that. And but I met with some council members and advocates 3 years ago, started working with them on this, and really explained to them the process, the cost, and had most of them, I think, understanding that it really wasn't the best time, and if you want to do that, we have a new facility we're opening, as you're well aware. We have a new headquarters is under construction. We have a lot going on in the sheriff's office, and so I was adamant that we weren't going to take over anything until we had the time to do it and the money to do it, because I was putting us in a bad spot. So I think reasonable minds at the time agreed with that, even those who wanted to get rid of it. And we elected a new body of council members last September, a new mayor, a new body of council members. And again, the advocates got some council members that they were interested in trying to push the subject again. And so a brand new council member filed legislation to, quote, end privatization in a very abrupt way. And to be honest with you, that's been a problem ever since. We've been working with that council member. It's council member Benedict, and trying to get her to back off of the urgency, the immediacy of doing that, because I've got other challenges right now. But with all things said, and with some publicity about it again, and some of the advocates criticizing Core Civic, Core Civic got tired of that, and at some point wrote a letter and said, then we're tired of being the punching bag for this subject, and therefore we're out in October. Now, if you're anti-privatization, you're not going to be reasonable about this conversation, but And I don't really care either way, to be honest. We run facilities as well as anybody. We're in the government. I used to work for a private facility back in 1990. So I've seen both sides. Neither one of those are the answer or the devil. It's really all on how you manage those. And I've seen really good privately managed ones. I've seen really good government managed ones. I've seen people who run government ones end up in jails and prisons for corruption. I've seen private companies in corruption. So I just don't buy that there's an answer on either side. But the advocates who were so passionate about this, really have now put everybody in a little bit of a bad spot. We now, because CoreCivic's leaving, the Sheriff's Office, will take over that facility October the 4th. There's over 200 employees. We have to hire, transition, train. We've got to do a whole inventory system, taking on this really within 60-something more days, in the middle of a COVID pandemic, in the middle of a brand new facility across the street, and a major construction project for our headquarters and training facility. So I'm a bit frustrated at how it was handled, and again, I don't pick and choose. People want to blame CoreCivic for pulling out. There's equal blame on the local legislative body for the way it was handled, and quite frankly, that's where we are.
And it lands in your lap. It's interesting. You're going to have to hire those folks, but I think I saw you tweeted out the other day. Was there you were welcoming a new crop of, I guess, officers, deputies?
Right.
What was that?
How many? But that's for our normal facilities. Yeah. So we're often recruiting and in need. I mean, we'll probably talk about this, but we have some 30 people out on COVID positive employees, and obviously turnover in any environment like ours. So we're always looking for people. It's a very tough line of work to recruit to, and again, when you abruptly end a contract like that, those people who are doing that work out there today, we need them to stay there, and we want them to obviously become Sheriff's Office employees. But it'd be hard to go find 200 people overnight to start a facility. And so we're not talking about taking over a restaurant here. This is a very comprehensive, complex system of a facility like that. So a bit frustrated, worn out, got a lot going on. All of us in the Sheriff's Office have worked extremely hard in the last 6 months with everybody else's challenges. We've all had them. Leaving here this morning, going to deal with the courts, where we have a lot of issues trying to get people who are positive COVID through the legal process when you can't physically take them. And it could have been handled, should have been handled much better, and unfortunately we're under the gun as far as timing.
I'm glad you mentioned courts. I know that the state Supreme Court kind of set. Jury trials aren't going to start for a while, I think, still, but before the end of the year they will. And your deputies, of course, are involved with bringing defendants back and forth into the courtroom and all of that. And I've talked to some lawyer friends of mine. There is business going on, say, over in the Birch Building, just not maybe jury trials. And he says, you go over there, and depending on the courtroom and where you go, some places you feel safer than others in terms of the steps they're taking to make sure there's social separation and masks and limits on how many people at one time can be in a courtroom. And I know sometimes when you're bringing a bunch of defendants over for some kind of docket, I mean, they're all side by side together and there's a bunch of them. How are you going to do that when things get back up and running? You can't have them all, shackled to one another walking into a courtroom together, can you?
Yeah, Nick, one of the things that people probably don't understand about that process is that they may care about one case, meaning obviously if they're a victim or active in one case, but there's 200 or so a day of those types of things that are going on. If you take, if every one of those has an inmate or a witness that's in jail, all of those bodies have to be physically taken over to a small, a holding area. And just a few weeks ago, half of our staff that work in that division were positive COVID and were sent home, and we had over 200 and something inmates that were positive at the time. So the reality of trying to manage COVID within moving inmates in small spaces is very difficult and very dangerous, quite frankly. The use of technology in our country today, not because of COVID, but because of other cost savings and security measures, is really the direction and the way we need to be going. And we've had technology here, for years and years, and very underutilized by the court system. And so we really haven't advanced that very much. And so when COVID broke out, we had a lot of opportunities and we've used it in an increased way, but there are glitches on all sides. But I looked at some numbers before I came over here this morning. I think it was last week, on a certain day of the week, there were 84 people due in court And of those 84 people on the technology and even the physical movement, 22 of them actually was ever even seen by a judge. And so the point of that, that's a regular occurrence. The point of that is there's a lot of legal maneuvering that needs to occur, but it doesn't need to require the physical move of that prisoner or that inmate. And our system hasn't been very good at that. So lawyers and court systems move everybody over there and then pick and choose who's physically needed in the courtroom. My hope is that we can get everyone to agree that we want to get everybody where they belong on time in a safe way. But if we can only move the ones that physically have to be present, for example, a trial, or even in some cases for signing purposes and other things, we need to move only those that have to, not those that are just wanted to be over there. So it's a complicated, expensive, dangerous process to move that many people.
A lot you're dealing with. Listen, we got to take a break on that note. We have some calls coming in for you and several other things to talk about. If you'd like to join in the conversation, you're welcome to. The sheriff will be here till 9, so let's take a break. Come back. We'll continue right after this. Stay with us.